I think some of the key factors that lead to burnout is the client acquisition piece is something that I just feel like nurses and medical providers underestimate, and how difficult that can be, and how important marketing is, and things of that nature, and constantly having to get those clients when you in the hospital before were assigned a set of patients and you never had to worry about it.
I just want to do this forever. I really like it. I just don't want to run the business. But I love patient care, but I don't want to run the business. And they just get tired of the hiring, the recruiting, the training, the operations, that kind of thing. And that's where, it can be an evolution. It doesn't have to be a total exit.
When you have a lot of eggs in one basket, when you are not diversified and your succession planning is dependent on what you're doing being sustainable into the future, it really does force some conversation and planning to help people think through that broader, sort of service mix and diversification.
A lot of times people think, well, I can't let somebody manage the finances, or I can't let somebody handle payroll. I can't let somebody be the contact with vendors. But what happens then is the business really needs you all the time. And this fear of letting go and identifying yourself as the big boss of the operations means at the end, where you could have gotten 3 to 5 million for your practice, you're going to get 500,000.
Good evening and welcome to the Business of Aesthetics Annual Expert Panel webinar. This empowering discussion is designed to help you navigate challenges, leverage opportunities, and build a thriving career in aesthetics. Thank you for joining us, and a huge thanks to our panel of renowned industry leaders for being here. Tonight, we'll be sharing actionable strategies, best practices, and valuable insights to tackle the unique challenges aesthetic professionals face today. Let's also give a warm welcome to our panelists, Sara Shikhman, Carla Pierson, Kelly Smith, and Glenn Morley. It's truly great to have all of you with us tonight. Thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom and experience. Today, with our Business of Aesthetics expert panel, we'll be discussing a unique topic, and that is going to be planning your next chapter, knowing when and why and how to step away from your aesthetic practice. Whether you're preparing for a sale, stepping into a new chapter, or simply trying to future-proof your business, today's discussion will offer strategies and stories that meet you where you are and help you plan where you're headed. So in today's expert panel discussion, we will explore how to recognize the right time for transition, how to clarify your why and overcome emotional and financial fears, smooth transition strategies with mentoring successes, retaining staff and safeguarding patient care, and finally, how to envision and design your next chapter. So this is a live event, so please engage with your peers and ask questions and share your reactions. We are confident you'll leave tonight equipped with actionable strategies you can implement immediately. But before I dive in, I want to ask our audience a quick question. When potential patients search online for treatments you offer, does your practice actually show up, or are they finding your competitors instead? This is a major challenge for many aesthetic practice owners. You might be offering amazing services, but if you're not visible online, you're missing out on steady stream of new patients. So the good news is there's always a solution. With right digital marketing strategy, including local SEO, targeted ads, and funnel-based content marketing, you can not only attract more inquiries, but convert them into patients walking through your door. Stick around until the end of tonight's webinar, because we have something special for you that can help your practice's online presence to the next level. So let's get started. Let me introduce our panelists tonight. Please welcome Sara Shikhman, Managing Partner at Lingia Law. Sara is a seasoned healthcare attorney and entrepreneur with over 16 years of experience guiding med spas and healthcare businesses through complex legal and regulatory challenges. She's worked with more than 1,000 clients on everything from contracts and compliance to intellectual property and funding. She's also led multi-million dollar ventures, including scaling a med spa from a single room to 12 locations across multiple states. We're excited to have her perspective today as we dive into the intersection of growth, leadership, and legal clarity. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you so much.
And next up, please welcome Dr. Carla Pierson, Chief of Business Operations and co-founder of Smiley Aesthetics. Dr. Pierson is a healthcare executive turned entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in the aesthetics industry, with a background in critical care nursing, hospital operations, and corporate healthcare leadership. She brings a uniquely strategic and patient-centered perspective to the business side of aesthetics. She holds advanced degrees in nursing administration, business, and a doctorate in nursing practice. Under her leadership, Smiley Aesthetics reached $1 million in revenue within first year, founded on principles of operational excellence, safety, and community. We're honored to have you with us, Dr. Pearson. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Our next panelist tonight is Kelly Smith, founder and CEO of Projected Growth Consulting. Kelly is a nationally recognized business consultant, author, and speaker with over 20 years of experience in the aesthetic industry. As a successful med spa owner herself, she and her team have helped more than 5,000 practices nationwide scale to 7 figures and beyond. She's the author of 4 books on growing profitable practices and specializes in business strategy, financial growth, team development, and patient acquisition. Her mission is to help aesthetic practice owners build profitable, scalable businesses while achieving lasting success and sustainability. We're excited to have you tonight, Kelly. Welcome. And finally, please welcome Glenn Morley, an experienced plastic surgery and dermatology practice management consultant with over 20 years of expertise in the aesthetics industry. Glenn is a proven leader in the business development, operations, and marketing. She has helped countless med spas and aesthetic practices scale sustainably through strategies that focus on operational excellence, patient experience, optimization, and strong leadership. Her areas of expertise include client retention, sales coaching, workflow streamlining, and customer engagement. Glenn is also a passionate speaker and mentor committed to help practices thrive in today's fast evolving and competitive aesthetic landscape. We're delighted to have you tonight, Glenn. Welcome.
Thank you, Lester.
On your screen, you'll see the main points for today's discussion. I'm confident we will leave or help deliver an insightful and amazing webinar. And we have a great lineup tonight, and I'm truly appreciative of each of our speakers taking their time to be here. We also have some great questions lined up, so I'm going to dig into them right now. As mentioned, feel free to engage with us through the chat, whether it's a happy face, a heart, a thumbs up, or a comment. We love seeing your participation. Any questions you submit, I'll do my best bring it to the live discussion. If not, rest assured, one of our podcast managers will get your questions answered and follow up with you afterwards. And a quick reminder, if you stick around until the end of this webinar, we have something really cool, a little surprise for you. So let me get started. So let me get started with Sara. So let's begin with what often holds practice owners back, not just market forces, but emotions. Sara, in your experience, what common fears, financial or emotional, hold healthcare entrepreneurs back from transitioning out, and how can they address those head on?
I think one of the biggest things that I see is identity and the fear of letting go and people not trusting their team and not empowering their team to have processes in place, written ones, so that the person can step away. I think a lot of times people think, well, I can't let somebody manage the finances, or I can't let somebody handle payroll. I can't let somebody be the contact with vendors. But what happens then is the business really needs you all the time. And this fear of like letting go and identifying yourself as the big boss of the operations means at the end, where you could have gotten 3 to 5 million for your practice, you're going to get 500,000, because in most contexts, people don't want to buy something where it's dependent on the founder to stick around. They want something that's going to run like a well-oiled machine.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, that was a powerful way to kick off the conversation. So now let's talk about recognizing burnout or misalignment while you're still in the game. So, Dr. Carla, as someone who's led in hospital systems and private practice, what subtle signs of burnout or misalignment should aesthetic practice owners watch for, especially those who are still high performing?
Yeah. Burnout is obviously real in nursing. It is critical and it is happening all the time, whether it's in the hospital or otherwise. And a lot of nurses left the hospital to come to medical aesthetics. And I think this often gets overlooked there because of that. So, oh, well, you came to medical aesthetics because you were burnt out in the hospital. So it's not a thing in this world. But that's obviously not true at all. I think some of the key factors that lead to burnout is the client acquisition piece is something that I just feel like nurses and medical providers underestimate, and how difficult that can be, and how important marketing is, and things of that nature, and constantly having to get those clients when you in the hospital before were assigned a set of patients and you never had to worry about it. And so that is something that we see within our own practice that can lead to burnout. As far as some of those easy signs is the kind of the typical ones that you see. I'm just tired. It's just a season. Volunteering less, going quiet, just that loss of emotional investment. Like they just don't celebrate the way they did. They don't show as much concern, and that can be because of family issues or circumstances. And so, how much or little you're plugged into your team as a culture with family and stuff is up to you. And some people have varying opinions on that. But knowing some of those things allows you to see those signs of burnout a lot quicker, and to react to them sooner.
Thank you for that insight, Dr. Pearson. So, when you're thinking of exit strategies, positioning your business for success is key. So, Kelly, what should practice owners start doing now to make their business more attractive for acquisition or simply capable of running without them?
Well, I'm doing a series of YouTubes right now called Startup to Sell Out. So they say when you start a business, you should be thinking of your exit strategy, which is great advice. And most of us don't think of it like that. But Sarah was speaking of key man risk. Essentially, when you handle everything and you don't delegate certain things that are repeatable and that are systems or SOPs like payroll, scheduling, billing, some of these things that are very administrative and that are done over and over, you're creating a key man risk where when you pull yourself out of it, it's concerning to the potential buyer as to whether they're going to stay successful. So the KPIs that are really important to look at are, of course, your revenue goals, your retention, your average sales, but some of the intangible things that might not be as apparent are longevity of staff, productivity of your staff members, a solid organizational chart, and processes and systems like Sarah mentioned. And I do think that it's really a lot of times my clients come to me when they get to the point that Carla was talking about. It gets pretty overwhelming. They love patient care, but the finance, marketing, operations is not what they really signed up for, and it's a lot. And the marketing is something that people don't realize how much is required in this industry and how technical it can get. So what I find is buyers are really looking at, yes, the history of the financial side of things, but they're also not just concerned about EBITDA, they're concerned about the potential performas and the possibilities if you actually optimize capacity, had the right amount of money for marketing, because a lot of our buyers are synergistic or investor buyers, and they can look at your facility and say, gosh, you're operating at 50%. If I put a good operations manager in there and actually did marketing with enough of a budget, I could double the revenue. So they do look at potential as well. So as much as you can create a team, empower a team, lead a team so that you actually like to go to work, so you can not be feeling so burnt out and not create that key man risk, that's really important. Not that you're going to sell it and just walk away. You know, that it's about a 6 to 9 month process. And then a lot of times the owners might want the doctors to stay around in some kind of capacity as a medical director, or the owner to stay around, you know, for 6 months to even 2 years part-time. So we don't have to be so fearful of, oh gosh, if I decide to sell my business, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. They usually do need some transition time and some help. But if you set yourself up for success with clear KPIs of what your revenue goals are, your conversion goals, your average sale, your retention, your closing ratios, the number of leads you need, a clear marketing plan, industry benchmarks of your expenses, all of those things give the buyer confidence to know that it's a well-constructed business that can continue on without necessarily that primary provider involved, because they've built a team around them and they've enabled them and trained them to help them grow an organization.
Fantastic. Some great actionable advice. Thank you, Kelly. So it's not always a burnout. Sometimes it's just a moment to pause and reassess. So, Glenn, from your work with growing med spas, how can owners distinguish between temporary operational overwhelm and a deeper signal that it might be time to plan their next chapter?
That's a great question. And I don't know that there's one answer for what for all owners. Typically, it requires sort of understanding what an owner's long-term and short-term goals are. Um, we very often, when we are talking to owners about succession planning, we try to nail down what kind of timeline they're looking at. Because if a transaction is part of the mix, they need to start thinking about this at a minimum 5 years before they plan to exit. Because selling your practice means that a buyer is looking for some sustainability. And so understanding what the end goal can look like often leads to deeper discussions around, what's going on today, what's the tipping point for you, and understanding whether it's short-term operational frustration or a longer-term need to take a step back from a business for whatever personal things are going on. That's one of the most important things to consider. But I really loved what Sara was saying about the fear that owners have for letting go and not always trusting that their teams are ready. The bad news is teams are probably never ready unless you prepare them. And so, starting and creating a plan that creates redundancy, and really having that mentality for every position in the practice, that if someone, cannot depend on a backup plan at the front desk or in billing and operations and marketing, if we don't have a backup plan for really every single key person in the practice, then things fall apart when you go on vacation, never mind when you retire. So it's never more important than for an owner. And that gets complicated because often owners are also operators. And there's a little bit of a risk when you are bringing in another operator to essentially take over your book of business. And there's, sort of the balance of how do I refer to this new provider and reduce my income and my busyness, in order to prepare for departure. And so, these are complicated questions that have a slightly different answer for every practice, every owner. But at the end, the answer to whether this is a short-term wish or a long-term solution that needs to be carefully crafted. I think you go into it planning for the long term no matter what. And in the course of that planning, it becomes clearer and clearer what you would like to do in the short term. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it absolutely does. Yes, thank you for the clarity, Glenn.
Mhm.
So, also a reminder for all the panelists: if you do want to share some insight, please stop, and you can stop me and share your insights. We would like to make this a discussion. So, planning ahead. Let's talk about planning. So, planning ahead protects value, especially when emotions run high. So, Sarah, from a legal perspective, what are the top two to three things a med spa or aesthetic practice owners should put in place before stepping away, whether that's selling, passing it on, or closing down?
Yes. So the top three things someone should prepare when thinking about a transition is number one, their corporate documentation. So all the legal paperwork, how your practice is structured. Is it there an MSO, the employment agreements of your providers, any vendor agreements you have? Oh, cute. Any other documentation that you have that really governs the practice. So you want to make sure that your corporate documents are in order. And if they're not in order, that's okay. The time to get them in order is before thinking about the transaction, not after the sale. Because what happens is during most practice transitions, if there's a buyer, even if they're not a sophisticated buyer, even if it's a friendly transaction, they tend to ask questions or their attorney will ask questions. And if it's discovered at that moment that something is missing or incorrect, or if you actually don't own anything, you're going to get a really big discount in the value that you negotiated. So corporate documentation is one. Two is your compliance. So you want to make sure that what you're doing as correctly as you can. Of course, being realistic, and having been a practice owner myself, I know that things are not always perfect, and that's okay. But the time to bring things into compliance is before the sale. So number one, corporate documentation. Number two is corporate compliance. And number three is really making a list of what are the assets of your practice. For example, do you own a trademark for your logo or your brand name? Do you actually own your equipment or is it financed? Do you actually own your office space or is it leased? Do you have any trade secrets that perhaps you can protect? Are there any unique things that you have? Even something like your unique injection pattern could be a valuable asset that you sell. So you really want to be clear on what your assets are and make a list of them. So those would be my top three: corporate documentation, your medical compliance, and really making a list of what your assets are.
Sarah, I'd love to explore just a little bit further, at least two of those, because they come up all the time. And they come up all the time, as you mentioned, when you're preparing for a sale or preparing for a transaction. One thing that I see coming up all the time is employment agreements. And that is just so critical for a buyer. And it's not always well understood by owners or sellers when they are kind of going down that path. And specifically, and this actually I edges over into compliance, having employees working as full-time employees and not 1099 employees. Can you talk a little bit about that, and from your perspective, what kind of counsel you offer? Because that is something that we talk to clients about. We really need to clean this up before we want to start talking to buyers.
Yeah. If you have a team that's committed to you, that's your full-time employee, and that has a strong employee contract with, let's say, a non-compete or a non-solicitation or some other provisions there that really align them with your practice. And if you have room in that contract, and from the person buying your practice to perhaps put in, like, if they stay for 1 year post the sale, they get a $10,000 bonus. So you want to have people in place that will be agreeable to those sorts of things. If all you have is 3 part-time contractors who come in sometimes when you are not busy or when you want to go on vacation, though that's not really a good employment arrangement that's going to carry over in a transaction.
Yeah, it doesn't feel sustainable for buyers. Yeah.
Right. Buyers
Yeah.
want to buy a business. They don't want to buy
Mm.
your availability because then they can just wait until you go out of business and hire you as an employee.
Right, right. The other one that's coming up a lot right now, and I don't know if the rest of you are hearing this, but GLP-1s, are just such a large part of a lot of organizations right now. And what I've seen in the last year is really discounting that or taking it out of EBITDA entirely. And so it's created a little bit of a conundrum for some owners and their succession planning and the hopes and expectations they had, for either selling or partnering are coming off the rails. And it's created an interesting conversation around, do you want to move forward without that, or do you want to just take a step back and revisit not transacting, not selling, and your business is great until you can't do this for one reason or another. Why would you stop? So, are the rest of you seeing that kind of thing from a compliance standpoint um, with transactions or sales? Is that coming up for you guys?
I've seen that come up in a number of transactions. And there's some alternatives like some semi-glutide mouth sprays and some things to work around.
Adding B12, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm also seeing them lean into different kinds of ways, whether it's any number of devices that can destroy fat, build muscle, along with nutritional guidance and impedance scales or body scans.
Right.
Some of them are still leaning towards other peptides, but waiting to see exactly how that's going to go. So I would, with my clients that are having plans to sell in the next 3 years or so, and they've got a lot of weight loss, we're really looking at what other modalities help stimulate weight loss that can be done synergistically, maybe
So
without.
creating sort of a service offering that has more stickiness and
Like
not
a
just
membership
sort of,
of weight loss that might have, whether it's light therapy and EMS and or cryo with the sauna blanket and the red light and the nutrition and the impedance scale and that kind of thing, vibration. I'm seeing them put together circuits to stimulate and help with weight loss programs, not leaning quite. They were like 90% on just prescribing, right? The GLs. So they've tried to put that into maybe 25% of what they're doing and really create a membership that's more lifestyle, nutritional, body contouring, muscle building, making a guarantee even when people walk 10,000 steps a day, they don't gain weight, they're hydrated to their level on the impedance scale, they stick to their program, whether it's endermology, light therapy, red light, sauna. I mean, there's, we know there's a lot of different ways to lose inches and weight, but they're trying to coach people with guidelines that are not just that.
just injections. Yeah, but it kind of back to the topic, it begs the question, when you have a lot of eggs in one basket, when you are not diversified and your succession planning is dependent on what you're doing being sustainable into the future, it really does force some conversation and planning to help people think through that broader, sort of service mix and diversification, which has
Great
been,
discussion.
sort of a super important.
Exactly, yeah, great discussion. So, yeah, so Dr. Pearson, let's talk about the internal compass, which is values and mission. So, So, Dr. Pearson, how did your values and vision shape your transition into entrepreneurship? And what steps would you recommend for someone trying to align their next chapter with their mission?
Yeah. This is a good one for me. Realized one day I was stopped chasing roles or someone else's boxed role and started chasing, more impact. And entrepreneurship was definitely the clearest path to that. I worked for a large private healthcare company for HCA, the biggest, largest one in the country, and did very well with them through my career. But it was always so boxed into this, this exact JD, or this is what this is. And I think there's two kinds of people: those that fit into those boxes, but just always are kind of stretching out and just always want it off your shoulders. And then I think you have to be careful, because if you don't fit in a box anywhere you go, then it might be a you problem, not a box problem. But I felt like it was you're just always like, if it'll just get off a little bit, I can stretch my wings a little bit. And so entrepreneurship was that path, and it wasn't clear until I was kind of tossed into a little bit. But for me, flexibility, autonomy, integrity, honesty, those are non-negotiables, and values that our whole company rests on, and we are required. And entrepreneurship allows you to live through those yourself all the time without question. You don't have to ever, decide whether or not you are ever going to let one of those values fall off the table. It's totally up to you. You never have that in another environment if you work for somebody else. So, and you can work alongside people and get high enough and all those types of things, but it's still just a lot of the values of somebody else. And so, those are really, really important to me. And I mean, I kind of audit my life like my business. I mean, my calendar and my income desires in my life are well understood and well known to me, and so they're aligned. And if they're not aligned for you, and that's how burnout happens. To go back to what we were talking about before, and you've got to consistently make sure that you are where you want to be. If you start in this business and you don't have a family yet, don't have kids, but that's what you want to do, then those planning, it goes along with doing corporate documents right. You've got to do those things at home in order to align that stuff in your life to have success long term. And I think that's very important. And I'll say, I think one of the most important things, we kind of discussed it a little bit, excuse me, before we got on. It's hard to notice if you're new to entrepreneurship. It's not necessarily exit planning. I agree with Glenn. Everybody wants those questions, and they need to be asked. It's not always easy to know what that pathway is, especially as a medical provider, because you've just never done this. And you do not know what you're getting into, because we're just not taught these things in school about anything related to business. But starting to ask yourself those questions on the front end: am I somebody who wants to show up in my med spa every day from 9 to 5 for the next 25 years? And I'm tickled to death, and that's what I want to do. Maybe have another location. It doesn't have to be a box. Or am I somebody who wants to build something, grow it, do it for 3 or 4 years, sell it, and move on to the next thing? And there's an in-betweens on those, but having those real conversations with yourself, your family, and being honest with yourself. Do I just want to make a lot of money and be done working? That's perfectly fine. That is okay. Or I'm somebody who wants to care for someone's face until I'm dying. Also really cool. It just really depends on what you want, but you need to have those conversations in order to align your life, your mission, your value with your company, and then have your culture bleed out of that, because it's really important.
Perfect advice. Thank you, Dr. Pearson. Yeah, I think I would like to also add something. Maybe you need to like sometimes step back a bit and like not be like that hamster on the wheel, you know, always being caught up with the day-to-day activities. Yeah, good, perfect advice. So exit isn't always about decline. It's often about evolution. So Kelly, you help thousands of practices scale. What financial or performance indicators suggest that it might be time for an owner to begin planning their exit or pivot?
Well, I think in terms of KPI, I think one, if it's a well-running machine and you can actually take a vacation for 2 weeks and not have very many interruptions, then things are running pretty smoothly. That's an indication that you probably got something organizationally that may be ready, right? But it's more of an emotional than a financial decision, I find, with most of the clients that I work with, because they are fairly passionate about what they do. And a lot of times they say, I just want to do this forever. I really like it. I just don't want to run the business. But I love patient care, but I don't want to run the business. And they just get tired of the hiring, the recruiting, the training, the operations, that kind of thing. And that's where, it can be an evolution. It doesn't have to be a total exit. Sometimes in the right situation, you can either go on a board of directors for another practice or be a fractional CEO or CFO for that practice. Or many times I'll have doctors that fly in that, will do surgeries once a month or once every other month for a week, to help with the practice because they do want to keep their hands in patient care. They just don't want to be the day-to-day. It's the operations that wears people down more often than enjoying what they actually are doing, especially when it comes to the patient care. So in an organizational lifestyle, you take off and you grow and then you shake out the things that are not working and then you kind of mature and then there starts to be a decline. And that's kind of when you're experiencing sort of a burnout or a plateau or like, gosh, I don't know how much longer I want to do this job. And that's when people short-sightedly will make a quick exit out of pain instead of planning. And I really think that really you can plan a nice exit with a year. I don't think it has to take 3 to 5 years if you've been running your business by the numbers with KPIs and you're running a well-oiled machine. You can make a decision to put your practice on the market in 6 to 9 months if you really have a management team. You've got your marketing, your operations, your finance going smoothly. The practice is running well. You're able to take a vacation and have things run smoothly. Then we're not talking about quite the whole 5-year plan because you've got these things in order. But our identity is so tied up in our business, who we are. And there's this panic feeling like, well, but who am I without my business? So I find it can be almost more of an emotional thing. So that burnout or transition, when you stop liking coming to work and you're not enjoying it anymore, and you can't seem to turn it around, and you're working on company culture, and you're spending 6 to 9 months, and you just can't get it to where you want to show up, that I think is a sign of burnout. And it can also be associated with that plateau where things get to maturity and they start to come down. The time to sell is when you're at maturity. If you start to come down, that's a good indication that this might be a good time to dig in and think about making a transition while you've still got really good numbers. And it doesn't mean that you need to get out of the industry. You might be speaking, you might be on boards, you might be maybe you go into consulting and helping other practices just as an ad hoc, but there's a lot of different things you can do without leaving the industry. But it's mostly what I find is the day-to-day that people are looking to get out of, not that they don't love the industry or love their patient care. So many times that can be an asset to stay on, but I do think the spoiler alert is when it's been your baby, your business, and you sell it to someone and you stay on and you do some patient care and a lot of changes start happening, that's really hard to take too. So you have to be very prepared that the new owners might make a lot of changes and they might paint the walls and change the decor and change the processes. That's where I find like surgeons are okay. They come in for a week once a month and get paid handsomely for it. Or they're the medical director that comes in one day a week or something like that and signs off. But if you've built up blood, sweat, and tears and it's just kind of you, it's hard to come in and watch people change everything around you. So I think that's important to keep in mind as far as that transition when you decide you're ready to leave.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Kelly. Very insightful. So, team trust is often what carries the business forward. So, Glenn, what are the most effective ways to preserve and even strengthen patient loyalty when a founder is stepping back or handing over leadership?
Yeah, I think trust is everything. There's a great book called The Trust Equation that I have read a couple of times. And in terms of patient care, I don't think it's an overnight transition because, patients um, they develop a relationship. It's not just clinical care with providers, it's a true relationship. And the care typically, if it's a long-term relationship, the care has, kind of evolved and treatment plans grow. And so, what started out as a mini treatment grew and, becomes, a relationship, but also a very large treatment plan when you look at it in its totality over a year timeline. And so kind of back to, what Sarah mentioned and what I was talking a little bit about, creating an exit plan means creating some sort of redundancy. And so for a very busy clinician, it can mean, sort of changing the way that you are treating patients, changing the language that you use. You may have another provider working in tandem with you, and it's easy to explain that, Dr. So-and-so or our nurse practitioner or physician assistant is partnering with me in patient care so that when I'm not here, there's always a provider that's familiar with you, familiar with your treatment plan. It can be that a new service or a new technique is one that another provider in the practice owns or masters. And so sometimes it means checking your ego a little bit and saying, this person does this so much better. So I'm going to recommend that we put you on his or her schedule for this. And, it's really what I have done a couple of times in my own career when I've recruited individuals to help me manage my own busyness. And it's if you do it in a transparent way and you're really honest and gentle and you don't just back away from your responsibilities, but remain committed and sort of mesh together what has been happening for a patient over time, then there shouldn't be any loss of continuity or trust. But it's a delicate balance. And it, kind of, Kelly, I want to make sure that I didn't misspeak. I may have misspoken when I said 5 years. This is the kind of thing that when I'm working with clients comes into play. So, if you're thinking about being gone in 5 years, then you've got to create some redundancy. And buyers, if a transaction is coming into, the mix or decision making, they're going to want you to stick around for at least a year. And more often than not, what I hear from buyers is 3 years minimum. One group up in Chicago requires 5 years. And so it's, it on the outside, 5 years, but there's a lot to sort of carefully balance so that continuity is there for your team and trust and for patients as well.
Yeah, and
Thank
sorry,
you. Yeah.
just to add one thing, the more buyers you have in the mix, the more negotiable the deal becomes. So there
Yes.
are some private equity buyers who want 5 years of continuity, but there are good, if you're going to have multiple bidders, if you have the group from Chicago bidding against the group from New York, somebody's going to give.
Suddenly it goes to 4 or 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think it's always the better you position yourself for sale, the more buyers you'll have, the better you can negotiate. So it's all comes down to that.
Good point.
Well, and when you build your organization where you can take a 2 or 3 week vacation without anything falling apart, you've already got those junior, almost senior providers, that have shadowed
Yeah.
work with you. Just like if you're the owner, the injector, and the surgeon, when you really want to be the surgeon, you've got to have that other injector assist you long enough to where they start doing all the injectables and you say, they've been trained in my techniques. You can get in sooner with them. It's less expensive. Or if you want me to treat you, it's 3 months out, but it's more expensive, right? Because that's how we wean them off to those other injectors. And typically when you're getting close to selling, you've got enough of a team where your clients are seeing multiple providers and things like that. So I think the transparency is great. I think having them work with you in the room, being excited about the transition, letting them know that you're still going to be around, that you're not just poof gone, because you're not. The shortest I've seen of a transition is 6 months. The longest I've seen is 5 years. I'm seeing a lot of 6 to 18 month transitions, depending on the size of the practice, I guess, and the scope, and whether it's surgical or non-surgical. If it's a med spa versus a surgical location, the surgical is a longer transition. Would you say, Glenn, that's a longer transition than maybe
I
some of
do, but I have not ever seen a 6 month transition, so that's actually really interesting to hear that.
yeah, I've seen it
That's
several
pretty
times.
short.
I've
Mhm.
seen it several times, but that's someone that comes in, that's really excited. They know what they're doing. They are already licensed and they really want to take over. And sometimes the intention is
Oh,
to
okay.
stay
So if
longer.
another operator takes over, that makes sense to
Definitely. I
me.
have
Yeah.
operators all the time looking for a second location or a third location. They know
Okay,
what they're doing. They
got
don't
it.
necessarily want that previous owner in their way, second guessing their decisions. And it's kind of hard for the owner too, because we take it personally, even though we try not to, when they start improving or changing things or changing the CRM or changing the protocol or wanting to mix things up. It can be kind of tough to be in there. So it kind of depends on the buyer, who's really buying it, and everything's negotiable. And if you have one buyer, you really have no buyers. If you've got a pool of buyers, you've got choices and you've got negotiation. So the idea of selling it only to an employee or only to a competitor is not the optimal strategy at this point of time. Dealing with a deal maker and actually knowing how to put together a 2 page highlight reel without saying where exactly who you are and taking it to market opens up the potentiality of a lot more choices in negotiation and pricing and bidding. So you'll get a better price that way instead of kind of that old school, let me see who I know, or if my fellow wants to buy it, or my employee wants to buy it, or if my competitor wants to buy it. There's a lot of agencies now that will work with 5 million and under size firms, and practices and small business brokers that will really help package and take you to market, sometimes for really reasonable prices, and that can be extremely helpful.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Glenn. And yes, it's perfect discussion. So let's talk about continuity and leadership after the founder. So, Sarah, you helped grow multi-location med spas. How would you advise someone to mentor successes or build a management structure that keeps the business thriving even after the founder exits?
Well, I should say that I've built a big med spa, but we didn't do everything right. So we made a lot of mistakes in that process too. And I think some of the mistakes were about buying something but not really understanding who the important players are, and that understanding that, wow, there was one injector who was going to be 50% of the revenue of one location, for example, and really recognizing that if this person leaves, the location will really suffer a great deal. So I think one thing to think about is to put something in place where people are incentivized to stay and people are incentivized to have some kind of structure where 3 years from now they're going to have additional responsibilities, more vacation time, whatever it is that's important to them. So one thing that could help is developing a structure where, let's say, there's injector level 1, injector level 2, injector level 3, lead injector, regional lead injector, clinical trainer, whatever, giving somebody some stepping stones to look forward to so they stay, and giving them more responsibility. And at the same time, making it so your scheduling is not so provider dependent. So what I mean by that is when someone's scheduling with your practice, making the first choice something like book with first available provider, not first choice is Amy's F, but first available provider, because that will keep people trying different new providers, and then also running specials for new providers so that people are not so committed to the individual provider, they're more committed to your practice. But at the same time, on the leadership side, saying to your providers, look, the long-term goal here is X, and if we achieve this goal, here's what's in it for you. So for example, we had a plastic surgery client, and what they did is they said, if we sell our practice anytime in the next 10 years, you, Sarah, injector, will get $100,000, and it's in your contract. So they didn't make the injector an equity owner, which would be quite complex, have tax implications, all that kind of stuff. But they promised Sarah that essentially if they sell their practice, she's going to get some amount of money. And you could structure that many different ways. It doesn't have to be a fixed amount. It could be a formula, but you can get people to stay by essentially entering into contracts with them that say, if we sell, or if X event happens, or if we reach $10 million in revenue, you get this bonus. And so everyone understands what's in it for them. Because I think in today's environment, people really care, like, what's in it for me. They understand your personal struggles. They understand that you're a business owner and you have a tough life and blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, though, when things get tough, the question they ask themselves is, what's in it for me?
Sarah, I just want
Perfect
to,
advice.
before we
Yeah.
move on, I couldn't agree with you more about, I think we put a lot of, there's a lot of social stigma around the injector being the face of the practice and all of that, and a lot of like, you are the face. I will say we experienced this. My twin sister who works with me, who is our lead clinical injector, getting her out originally, we used some of those strategies. We actually raised her prices to make them higher than our standard price. So you want top tier service from our top provider, then you got to do this. So some things like that. And when we just didn't give it any energy, it died quickly. There's still some that see her and want to see her almost exclusively, but when there wasn't a lot of energy behind it across our whole practice at all of our locations, when any providers turn over, that's our culture now. They're all trained in this way, in this manner, and here's the level of quality. So it doesn't matter if you see somebody in Memphis or you see somebody in Knoxville, it doesn't matter. You're getting the same level of person. And I think if you set that stage early on, that's what a lot of y'all are saying. Any transition period, anytime you need to step away, take an admin day, all that type of stuff, that stage is set from the very beginning. So I just wanted to say, I just really agreed with a lot of things you just said.
The training and the protocols, like what you're saying, so that if they order a certain facial, it's always done the same way, or your injectors are
100%
trained with the
SOP.
same techniques, and they're going to say the same things. And that's where when you bring someone new on, you let them shadow someone for 2 or 3 weeks before they start working with them is so critical. And then having those junior injectors be level 1 at a certain price, your level 2 at a certain price, level 3 at a certain price, your physicians at a higher price and harder to get into. That's where memberships can also really help. You set up, you're speaking like a true CRM creator, Sarah. Lean into your CRM, right? What rooms available, what staff's available, when can we get you in that's convenient to you, not necessarily who you've seen last time. Although people do get really connected to their injector and their hairdresser. What I do find is they're really, really connected until they can't get in for 3 weeks, but they can get in next week to the injector that's been trained by that injector, and maybe it's a little less expensive, right? And if you have a membership where maybe they get 20 units of toxin quarterly as one of their membership things, and you're always booking them for their next service, that's one way. Memberships are great for your valuation, your predictable revenue stream covering overhead and things like that, but it's also really helpful to get your clients to do multiple kinds of services with multiple practitioners or providers, which will really help with what you're talking about. And I really like that about memberships in the practices. I feel like they've got a lot more value by exposing your patients to different practitioners and letting them develop those relationships so they start really falling in love with the whole team, not just maybe one, provider that they come into.
Glenn, would you like to share something?
Well, I'm thinking about a few client practices that were reluctant to embrace this kind of model. They were worried that, their top provider would be antagonized. And, there's always, there's always going to be something, but I don't think you can let fear govern what you do as an owner. I think you have to be brave and sort of, back to what Carla was talking about, having a mission, and your mission is based on your values as much as what you want to do. And you want your people to trust each other, but also come together as a team and not feel like they're competing against each other, but, sort of walk with pride in the organization that they are a part of. So I couldn't agree more.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah. But before we close out, I'd love to ask each of you to leave our audience with this. If our audience remembers just one thing from today's conversation, what should it be? Kelly, would you like to go first?
Sure. I think setting your business up with good systems, SOPs, KPIs, and a team bonus, Glenn, like what you were talking about, to get people to work together. If we all are above, if monthly we are over goal and there's some kind of a shared reward, for over goal performance, that really makes people work together. But I do think that clarity of roles, your organizational chart, productivity, expectations, and clarity of that leadership, your mission, all of that trickles down. So if you don't like your company culture, we have to look in the mirror, which I've had to do a couple times and not like it, but it does come from you. And then when things are going right, you can look in the mirror and be happy about it. But it is creating everybody working together as a team. And when they can't do that without a clear organizational chart, clear position descriptions, productivity goals, what Carla was talking about as well, it's like you need clarity of what are the principles of the organization, what are we really trying to create, and then trying to reward them as a team will help them congeal and work together. And when you do those things, your business will run well, and you're setting yourself up to be able to sell when you're darn good and ready. You don't have to do it before you're ready, but always being ready before you're ready, I would say, is really important, because by the time you get ready, you're almost past ready from what I tell. I mean, a lot of times, people will hire me. I'm like, are you hiring me to help you bury the money in the backyard? No, I really want to. I've tried everything. I'm exhausted. I want to be done, right? So you don't ask for help till it's getting really miserable. So I think that's really why I try to teach people the basics so that they enjoy it while they've got it. They're preparing to have it organized to sell it. And then hopefully you sell it while you're still having a good time.
How about Dr. Pearson?
I mean, I think the one thing I would say is what we've said through this whole piece, which is a kind of like build a brain, not a bottleneck. Like you need to be able your processes and it should be, you should not be people dependent. You should be process dependent. I mean, it's all saying the same thing. I'm an SOP freak. That makes me so happy I can't see straight. Because then when I'm not in the room or I'm not present, I mean, something's thinking for me. At a minimum, I know that there's a step by step, and it's at least a guideline to get somebody in the right path. And then we haven't touched on people. And that's a huge key factor. That is just a big old fat question mark for everybody. You got to find the right people. You don't know if you have them. You start training someone, they turn over. There's just a lot of different factors there. But the one way you can protect all of that and put as much of yourself into your practice as you step away or do something or whatever the case is to ensure things aren't bottlenecking with you, because your brain is required. We'll take that brain and put it on paper or put it into a process. And there's ways to do that. And there's a lot of ways to do that people can help. And then the other thing I'll say, not to take too much time, is I feel we are so in this industry guided by social media and norms in social media. And what I mean by that is on the big ticket items like selling, or just some of these things are just so driven by what we see. I feel like this industry came in to the market at a time when social media has really taken over a lot of what drives a lot of what we're doing. And always, it's so critical. It's the most critical piece of marketing for us. There's no denying it. You got to know what you're doing, and you got to be, you need help from, gosh, people like Kelly, like there's all kinds of people that can help. But going to social media or listening to certain people who have followings or whatever the cases are, influencer for a lot of these things, culture, leadership, those things are not to be found there. They're to be found in your peers and your colleagues and people who have experience. And too often we fall into like, well, this is just what everyone says it should be. And I just think that that's really difficult. So these type of webinars, hearing from people who know what they're doing, reaching out to these people for guidance in some of those more complex topics. Please stay away from just an influencer who just, it just really caution people, because I think it's gonna be damaging.
Thank you, Dr. Payson. Sarah, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think if just one thing, something I like to tell my clients is if your business can't run without you, it's not a business, it's a hostage situation, and you don't want to put yourself in a hostage situation, and nobody wants to buy a hostage situation. So I never want to help people have a fire sale. Step number one is maybe you need to take one day off and see how your business runs without you. And then build up to taking a week off or 2 weeks off, or maybe 3 weeks off or a month off, and see what happens. So if you can't identify what needs to happen when you're not there, just try stepping away from it and then see what happens. And then you'll notice, okay, this is what I need to have. This is what I need to write down. That's an easy way to try to have processes in place.
Thank you, Sarah. Glenn, to close out.
To
Any-
close out, gosh, so many good tips. I guess, one thing that a mentor of mine sort of taught me, a way to think when trying to help people is to advise them to get educated. And so, everything that we've been talking about tonight may or may not apply to, different people, but you've got to be educated in, whether it's how to put together corporate documents, how to help your practice become plug and play so that you can go away. What does that mean? And um, getting serious about creating your succession plan, I think, means getting educated and, learning what you need to do so that you can safely and confidently, put your life's work where it needs to be at the end of your career. So I guess that would be it.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you. Tonight, I would say the time was flying, and I was also deeply into this conversation, and a very interesting topic to me as well. So let me get my screenshot. So I would love to keep going, but I want to be very mindful of everyone's time. Tonight has been awesome. So many comprehensive answers, valuable takeaways, and rich insights. Thank you all so much. Before I wrap up, I promised to our audience a special gift, and here it is. And that is, it is a complimentary practice growth strategy consultation from Naren Raja, the founder of Business of Aesthetics and CEO of Eco Marketing. He's offering you a thank you for joining us tonight. You'll meet with Lila Stone, a marketing advisor for the Business of Aesthetics. If you don't know her yet, she's helped hundreds of aesthetic professionals grow by improving their visibility, SEO, reputation, and many more. So what makes this session different is that Lila will actually study your online presence, your local competition, and your search rankings before your call. And then she'll walk you through customized, personalized recommendations just for your practice. So I would say you can scan the QR code or basically check the link in the chat to book that session. I mean, you can ask about the question. I mean, you can ask yourself, are people in your area finding you online? Are they choosing you when they do? And is your marketing working while your clinic is closed? And also to this topic about, transitioning or exiting out, your marketing should be ready. So yeah, those are some questions you can ask. And I would say, I mean, if you can also think, what's the risk if you book this meeting? I would say it's just your time, and there's no sales pitch, no strings attached. And what's the risk if you don't is basically you might be missing out something that could really help you grow your practice. So I highly encourage you to book. It's free, it's custom, and it could unlock your next level of growth. So I will leave you with that. Our time has come to an end, and it has been awesome. First of all, thank you to our expert panelists, Sara Shikhman, Dr. Carla Pierson, Kelly Smith, and Glenn Morley. You all were amazing. You shared so much insight, amazing best practices, and wonderful actionable content. If I were to sum it up, I'd say collectively, you made the complex simple, the hidden visible, and the difficult easy. Secondly, thank you to all of our attendees for the privilege of your time and participation. Without you, we don't grow together. Without you, we don't set each other up for success. A reminder to like, share, and review us on your favorite social media and stay connected with our panelists if you like deeper conversations like this. Until next time, on behalf of our panelists, keep striving for excellence and exceptional patient care. Thank you again for being with us tonight. We'll see you at the next expert panel series. Until then, take care and good night. Thank you, everyone.